First of all, this was an illegal bombing in Syria. These Syrians had nothing to do with the attack in Iraq. These are separate countries. I know that they like to make us believe that we're all a bunch of idiots that can't tell one country from the next in the Middle East. But I'm pretty sure we all can agree that Syria is not Iraq. So over the weekend, Biden claimed that his illegal bombing of Syria was actually an act of self-defense. Check out this letter that he'd sent off to Congress. He sent this off on Saturday, a letter to the Speaker of the House and President pro temp of the Senate, consistent with the War Powers Resolution. So here, dear Madam Speaker, dear Mr. President, at my direction on February 25th, 2021, United States forces conducted a targeted military strike against infrastructure in eastern Syria used by Iran-supported non-state militia groups. So just a little bit of background. February, I believe, 6th, 14th, 15th, or 16th. It might have been February 15th. So what happened was back February 15th, the United States received rocket fire from Iran-backed militia forces in Iraq. So this happened in Erbil region of Iraq, and which is the Kurdish region of the country. And there were 14 rockets that were fired. 3 of them ended up hitting U.S. coalition bases that were near the airport. And 1 contractor was killed. A U.S. service member was injured, as well as about 13 other people were injured. This was done by what they claimed were Iran-backed forces. Now, remember, Iran-backed forces is just a term to make you feel like Iran did it, when in reality, these are Iraqi forces that did this, who are not aligned with the West. Iraqi forces that want America out of Iraq. If you remember, Iraq has, we've been there for a very long time. They've asked us to leave. They've actually voted to have us leave. The government has voted to have us leave. They no longer want us there. They no longer believe our services are needed in Iraq. So the Iraqis want us to leave. Now, the problem is with America and how we're viewing Iraq is that the Iraqi government, the Iraqi people, they're cozying up a little bit too much to Iran. Now, remember, Iran is their next door neighbor. So comparing Iran to the United States all the way, 8,000 miles away or 10,000 miles away, it would make sense that they would be closer and would have shared culture, would have shared values, would have, some shared, with Iran. They share a lot, they share a border with Iran. So they're tending to be closer and cozier to Iran. We don't really like that. And of course, we want to remain in Iraq in order to surround Iran. That is the ultimate real objective as to why we're still sticking around. There's really no reason for us to be there anymore other than the fact that we want to surround Iran. So when these Iran-backed forces attack us, what they're really saying is these are not Iranian forces attacking us. These are not Iranians attacking us. These are Iran-backed forces, which are Iraqis attacking us, saying, get the hell out. So the U.S. said, well, we're going to take some time to find out really who did this. And there was a group that actually came out and said, we did it. And they're a group that actually helped defeat ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And they said, we did it. We don't want you around anymore. We did it. They took responsibility. And the U.S. still once again said, well, we still call them Iran-backed forces. And then on February 25th, the U.S. decided to bomb an area of Syria, which doesn't really make sense when you actually think about it. Iraq. We were bombed in Iraq by Iraqi forces that were Iranian-backed, and we go and we bomb Syria, right? So that makes a lot of logical sense. And Joe Biden says, no, it was a matter of self-defense. We did it in self-defense. That's why we did it. And that makes you kind of wonder, well, what self-defense against who? So you've got these Iraqis who don't want us in Iraq anymore. And they're actually acting on what they would believe to be an act of self-defense. And so they have bombed us to get, they're sending signals to get us to leave. And we then say, no, we're operating in self-defense, so we're going to bomb Syria. Are you following this? Because this doesn't make any logical sense at all, actually, except that the bombing that we did in Syria was supposedly of Iran-backed force areas, right? So Iranian-backed areas. So Biden says in this letter still, let's go on and read more of this. It says those non-state militia groups were involved in recent attacks against United States and coalition personnel in Iraq, including the February 15th, 2021 attack in Erbil, Iraq, which wounded the United States service member, wounded 4 United States contractors, including one critically, and killed 1 Filipino contractor. These groups are also engaged in ongoing planning for future such attacks. So he's saying here, these are non-state militia groups, so they're not backed by the Iraqi government. They're not backed by the Syrian government. You know, these are militia groups that he's saying are actually backed by Iran. Goes on to say, in response, I directed this military action to protect and defend our personnel and our partners against these attacks and future such attacks. The United States always stands ready to take necessary and proportionate action in self-defense, including when, as the case here, the government of the state where the threat is located is unwilling or unable to prevent the use of its territory by non-state militia groups responsible for such attacks. So he's saying, I did this in order to defend our personnel and our partners against these attacks and against us from future such attacks. So, okay. First of all, this was an illegal bombing in Syria. These Syrians had nothing to do with the attack in Iraq. These are separate countries. I know that they like to make us believe that we're all a bunch of idiots that can't tell one country from the next in the Middle East. But I'm pretty sure we all can agree that Syria is not Iraq. And if we are attacked in Iraq by these Iraqi forces who want us to leave, and then we say, well, we're now we're acting on self-defense, and so now we're going to bomb some area in Syria, this doesn't make any logical sense, especially when you take into consideration that the very groups that we are attacking now in Syria, and also those that are in Iraq, are the very groups that defeated Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And the last I recall, the reason we are even in the Middle East to begin with is to defend ourselves against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, right? So if we are acting in an act of self-defense, then that self-defense would be against the very terrorist organizations that we are in the Middle East to be combating, right? This would be against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So then why would it be an act of self-defense to go after the very people who helped us defeat Al-Qaeda and ISIS? Somebody explain that to me. Well, you can't. You can't explain it because it doesn't make any sense. So really, ultimately, what's going on here is that this is just a reason, a manufactured reason, to stick around in an area of the world that no longer wants us there. They've said, your job is done. Al-Qaeda and ISIS are defeated. We need you to leave. We've got it handled. We've got the rest of this. We want you to leave now. Now you're the invader. So these very groups that helped us defeat Al-Qaeda and ISIS, you know, they're trying to maintain their sovereignty. They're trying to maintain their country. Maybe they've got some, you know, these various different militia groups have some various different ideas on the government that they would like their country to be, how they would like their government aligned in their countries or whatever. That's an internal squabble. It's very similar to what we deal with here in our own country when we deal with, well, who should be president of the United States and who should be in power, Republicans or Democrats or maybe even a third party or whoever, right? Those are internal squabbles that we don't need to be involved in. So you've got various different political groups and political ideologies rising up in these countries. That's fine. That's fair enough. They're going to do what they're going to do. They're going to have their internal battles. But at the end of the day, the reason why we were in the Middle East was to defeat ISIS and Al-Qaeda, really to defeat Al-Qaeda. And then we created ISIS, and then we had to go and defeat ISIS. And these groups are helping us. They did help us do this. And now we're attacking those very groups. So that does not look like an act of self-defense. It actually looks like they're acting in self-defense. They're trying to get the invaders out of their country. They now want us to leave. And we're saying, no, we're hunkering down. They're doing little attacks to try to get us to leave. And we now instead attack them back, the very people who helped us defeat these organizations, which means if we defeat the people who helped us defeat these organizations, guess what happens? Those organizations rise back up. So is that the plan? Is that ultimately the plan? Is the plan to allow for a resurgence of ISIS and Al-Qaeda so that we have an excuse to stick around? Because it kind of looks that way. Right? It kind of looks that way. So this is a bunch of bull. And the bottom line is we need to leave the region. We need to leave. Joe Biden is just re-implementing Barack Obama's old policies. He's essentially wanting to stick around in Syria. The reason why he bombed Syria and not Iraq is because really they want Assad out. They've got a puppet government already going on in Iraq. They're still trying to maintain some control over that puppet government who's starting to kind of lean towards Iran. And they're like, no, we don't really like that so much. We want you to stay with the U.S. And so they're not wanting to leave Iraq because they're wanting to continue to surround Iran. But the real target has always been, over the last several years, has been Assad in Syria. And Joe Biden, by going after now these Iran-backed forces in Syria rather than Iran-backed forces in Iraq, is essentially just keeping that status quo going, threatening Assad, essentially saying, we're not going anywhere. We're going to continue to attack. We're going to use other excuses as to why we're doing it. We're going to, make up some crap and that the American people will believe, because Americans are gullible. As we watch the news, we hear Iran-backed militias and we immediately say, oh, it's the Iranians that did this, even though there were no Iranians involved. And there, again, there were no Iranians involved. And this attack that happened in Iraq, we then go and bombed Syria. I mean, how stupid do they think we are to believe this? The problem is many people are they're reading this and they're not thinking twice about it. But you and I are thinking twice about it. And so we have to just continue to sound the alarm and say, listen, time to go. Assad, he's been in battle in a civil war. We obviously have been helping try to get him out of there. That helped create ISIS. We don't want to go back to that. We need to get out of there and allow Syria to rebuild. We need to get out of there and allow Syria to maintain, it's a sovereign country. We lost. We need to move on. And we didn't defeat Assad. We didn't get him out of power. We need to just get out of Syria, give them back their oil. We've been guarding the oil, protecting the oil. That's what Trump said. He was at least honest about it. And we need to get out of Syria. So, this is just another one of those spins to keep us in the Middle East and to keep us with the status quo of we're going to go and topple Assad. And that is what we're doing there. Now, one little bit of good news is when it comes to the Middle East and us trying to withdraw from the Middle East, it does look like Biden is going to maintain and continue the talks that Trump actually began with the Taliban in Afghanistan. So over the weekend, another statement was issued by the White House saying that they are going to continue. The same person that was tasked with the negotiations between the Taliban and the U.S., that person is going back to the Taliban, is going to continue to negotiate. And that, at least it's a signal that Biden does believe that Trump was on the right path with that and that he's going to attempt to continue. We will, I'm kind of not holding my breath on that one because I don't really know if Biden means it. He can say all these things and, yeah, we're going to attempt to get out of these wars. We're going to try to get back into the Iran nuclear deal. We're going to attempt to make a deal with the Taliban and get out. But we'll see. The proof is in the pudding whether or not it actually happens. But at least at this point, the White House is saying that they're attempting to negotiate a deal, peace talks with the Taliban in order to withdraw from Afghanistan. Now, the plan under Trump was to withdraw completely out of Afghanistan by May of this year, May of 2021. We'll see if Biden actually pulls that off, if he actually is able to do a deal with the Taliban and actually get out of there. Now, of course, the Biden administration is saying, well, we're not really sure because it depends on if the Taliban can hold up to their end of the bargain. We don't know if they're going to move the goalpost when this negotiator goes back over there. We're not really sure. That's why I say don't hold your breath too long. The proof is in the pudding. We'll see if we actually end that war in Afghanistan. But at least it's somewhat of a good sign that he is not switching negotiators. He's going to keep that person going, and he is still facilitating talks with the Taliban.